Wrote this song while crewing Aaron on a 100-mile foot race through the trails in the rain and mud. How about that? Miles to go. 100 miles to go. Don't ask me why I do it, I don't know. Miles by foot. 100 miles by foot. Don't ask me why I do it, I can't stay put. Rain is a coming, can't give a fit. Rain is a coming, can't give a fit. Don't ask me why I do it, but I am legit.
Welcome to episode 53 of the MR Runningpains podcast. As always, this is Aaron Saft. Today, I've got a guest who maybe you've heard of before. He's done enough to have some name recognition, and it's really cool because he comes up with a lot of his own adventures and FKTs. Pretty special gentleman. His name is Jason Hardrath, and he's going for 100 FKTs. Now, as he explains, some have been broken, but to have completed and attained 100 FKTs, some being unique, some being classic or pre-established, if you will. But we have a great conversation. I really enjoyed learning from Jason, and we talk about how to create a safe adventure. It doesn't necessarily have to be an FKT. It can just be something that you come up with on your own. But, in coming up with that, how do you do it safely so that you come out of it and the other side unscathed or as healthy as possible and refreshed, and those that love you don't have to worry too much. So I appreciate Jason's knowledge and sharing that with us. It was a fun conversation, and I certainly took a lot away from it. I hope you do. So Jason Hardrath is with me today. Jason, how are you?
I really can't complain. It's been a pretty good week.
That's awesome. And just so people know, Jason, where are you joining us from?
I'm joining from Klamath Falls, Oregon. It's down in southern Oregon near Mount Shasta, which is just across the border in Northern California, and south of Bend. That's another big sort of landmark city here in Oregon, about 2 hours south of Bend.
Did you grow up in the Pacific Northwest?
I did. I was actually born and raised in Baker City, Oregon, which is up in northeastern Oregon near Hell's Canyon and the Wallowa Mountains. So, yeah, love this area, love this side of the country. Definitely a big old playground out here.
Which we will definitely get into and talk about. What got you into running?
Oh man, it's a journey that goes way back for me. I mean, I grew up in a family that definitely was outdoors oriented, but it was like small agriculture town. So more like motorsports and hunting type stuff. But it at least got me in the outdoors. And then discovered running because I was a kid that couldn't function in school without physical activity, diagnosed ADHD. And so had to have physical movement. My parents pushed me into sports as an outlet for that. And, kind of became a skater for a while and then broke my wrist. So the parents are like, no more skating. But that kind of built the fitness and a bit, I would say, of my tenacity. Because with skating, you have to like put up with falling down over and over again and it hurting, but you get up and you try again. So I think I built some resilience and some tenacity there and built the base fitness to be able to transition into running as a middle schooler and be good enough at it to sort of be like, oh, well, maybe I'll be the person in my school to break a 6-minute mile for this year because no one else was doing it and I was kind of close. So that became a really big deal, breaking the 6-minute mile, and I succeeded at that. And that kind of solidified like running goals and really a goal setting mindset into my mind at a young age. And so then it became this personal process of what's the next goal I can reach for. I wanted to, make it onto the varsity team in high school and then make it to, the districts and the state championship meets. And then the goal was to make it onto a college team. Even if I just barely got onto some tiny college team, it's like, oh, I want to try to run in college. And then, after college, it was like, okay, let's try my hand at marathons. And then kind of feeling like I'd pushed my running to the top, as fast as it was going to go. There was still room for marginal gains here and there. I was like, oh, let's experiment with triathlon because it's like I might be pretty good at this biking thing, and I've never swam before. So jumped into Ironman triathlons, right? Because of course, what you do is go for the very longest triathlon out there when you're trying to learn new skills. Jump in with both feet. So just kind of took this journey of like looking for the next big challenge. And that led to me doing adventure running in the outdoors and chasing what are known as fastest known times that everybody has sort of become aware of over the course of 2020. But really enjoying sort of mixing this. I'm a professional mountain guide now, as well as a school teacher. So like mixing this, fitness skill set with this outdoor skill set to do these big pushes through the outdoors to see beautiful country. And that sort of circles back to that childhood of growing up, appreciating and thinking it's normal for human beings to like go out into these far out outdoor spaces. And this was kind of like a way to marry the two. And I found it really enjoyable and really engaging over the course of 2019 and 2020, especially with everything, racing all being shut down. It was like, oh, well, I already enjoy this, so I guess I'll do it more.
So that was just 2 years ago, 2019, that you started this endeavor of going after FKTs and adventure running.
Basically, yeah, the tail end of 2018 is when I discovered fastest known times, and I was already doing things, running between peaks and running around Crater Lake, tagging high points and things of that nature. So it just felt really natural to go, oh, I'll chase fastest known times because it gives me that added incentive to sort of feel like I'm racing while I'm out there. That desire to sort of optimize and maximize performance and really master an area and master your skill sets. And I liked that sort of sense of urgency it created.
What was your first inspiration to do some type of adventure run? And do you remember what it was?
Well, I mean, a big sort of pivot of my life was a car accident that I had in 2015 where I was ejected from the vehicle. It was kind of a hard reset for my life. I'd, gotten all the way in triathlon as far as qualifying for Ironman 70.3 World Championships in 2014 and 2015. And then suddenly couldn't go get my own drink of water. And it was sort of a restart from ground zero. And it took a really long time for running to come back, but I knew I needed something to pursue. Because I'd come to understand that about myself, like this process of pursuing personal goals, growth goals, especially physical movement and outdoors oriented goals, was absolutely essential if I was going to maintain mental health. So I started setting goals with climbing local hills and local mountains. And, then that led to gathering this whole rock climbing skill set and mountaineering skill set. So that kind of set the tone that way. And then as the running came back, it very naturally turned into this progression of longer runs between these mountain peaks on like the PCT or these other major trail systems. And it just kind of evolved. One thing led to another, as they like to say.
Was Strava involved in this at all?
I mean, definitely a bit of Strava. It's always fun to chase Strava segments. So that was a part of it. And then just sort of seeing what's out there, like, I wonder if anybody's ever climbed these three random peaks in the Pacific Northwest that are like scrambly rock climbs, and then run this like major trail system between them. It's like, I wonder if anybody's actually ever done that. Because it's sort of like a unique way of blending and feeling like you're doing something novel and something new, as opposed to the same old thing. That sort of sense of that spirit of exploration, right? And that's one of the things I love about these adventure runs and fastest known times is you can, with the really big efforts and the really big projects where you do the research and you like find systems to connect things, it sort of harkens back to that spirit that I think drove us during the age of exploration to go to the poles and to go to the peaks and make first ascents of things. And so now that most things have first ascents, the question for most of us isn't, can I be the first to climb it? It's, can I climb it faster than anyone? Or can I connect it in a way no one ever has before? Or can this connection that's been done before over the course of a week be finished in a day? So we're asking different questions, but I think it's the same spirit that drives us.
And then was there a resource that you went to find out these things?
Strava is like a great mapping tool. On the other side of it's like social media and fitness tracking aspects. You can also use it to map routes. So that was useful. You can also look at heat maps and see where people have gone before. Summit Post, Mountain Project for rock climbing are places to go to find different outdoor routes and mountain routes. You can look at things like, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, Northwest Hiker. So there's these different websites, these forums where people post trip reports about things they've done or things they want to do. So those are great resources. The Fastest Known Time website is actually a fabulous way to find a lot of well-refined routes to go test yourself on, because lots of people have, the routes have been sort of hand selected as opposed to like Strava segments, where it might just be as good as somebody's mailbox to the local coffee shop. Fastest known times, it's like, okay, there has to be something distinct and where others would want to repeat it. It needs to be a good trail system, or it needs to be a series of aesthetic peaks. So that's a great resource to go to and start poking around and figuring out what routes you want to do. And then you can use mapping software such as like CalTopo is a great resource, or AllTrails is another great resource. I'll make sure I send you those to have links down below for people that maybe have never used them. So like, yeah, you can start fiddling around in the safety of your own home with how to use these mapping softwares and how they work on your phone, because a lot of them have apps. And sort of start figuring out like, okay, how could I build an adventure route, and what's an adventure route worth doing in my area? And that's kind of the root of it, is asking that question, like finding that question that inspires you, like, can I do, and then you fill in the blank. And that's an adventure run, right? You're just using that running fitness to go answer a question for yourself.
I enjoy following people like Coree Reese as well, that he may choose all of the mini marts in the town he lives in and try to hit them all in one night, just as his adventure. I think that's it's a joy to see the humor that he can find in adventure running too. So, we have the only limitation, I guess, is whatever we put on ourselves. So in that regard, what's the most bizarre one you've come up with?
Oh, I mean, I want to say what I love is seeing people find the creativity in their own area. I've seen stuff of people connecting subways, like trying to beat the subway between certain points. There's stories of people connecting airports. There's stories of people connecting bridges, right? So you kind of find these things in your area and you go, okay, how can this be done? And for me, what's in my area is I happen to have the privilege of being around a lot of epic volcanoes and epic mountain peaks. And, it's not too far of a drive to go play in Death Valley or in the Eastern Sierra of California. So I've mixed a lot of like rock climbing things. I think it's been really fun as well to go discover sort of canyoneering through slot canyons, not highly technical ones where, you're super likely to die, but like kind of the more semi-technical, mildly technical ones where, you might use a rope, or a lot of people would use a rope for some of the sections, but you're able to kind of take it like an obstacle course race, if you will, and employ like some rock climbing moves and some chimney climbing moves along with your running, and just kind of have this cool experience out in nature. And I love that about running plus rock climbing as well. When you're going to climb an alpine route up to a high point, there's just something about it when you mix running, because a lot of us, we love running because of its therapeutic nature, where it quiets our mind. To me, when I pair that up, where I have the run up to a rock climbing route, and then I'm pulling onto these climbing moves of a route where I've rehearsed it, so I know I can climb it, I know where the holds are, but like there's no rope, there's no protection, so it's like suddenly your mind just tunes in, and it's for me. I mentioned my ADHD earlier. Like normally I have a loud, cluttered mind going all over the place. I pull onto those moves and it's like all I feel is the grain of the rock and the tension in my muscles and the breeze. It's just this beautiful quiet, and I'm able to appreciate the beauty around me as I sequence up a rock climb to hit the summit of a peak. To me, that's what I'm in love with. And those are the wild things that I love doing. But I think that creativity is available in so many different ways, depending on what's around you. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's beautiful. When you do these routes, I know that, running FKTs have to be a certain percentage of running. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's basically 50%. But the FKT website considers rock climbing that's easier than 5.7 to be scrambling, which means it doesn't count against your 50%. But if you're going to have rock climbing that's more difficult than that, or any other sport mixed in, then it's 50% has to be on foot, hiking, scrambling, moving time. And then if you're going to involve really technical terrain, so harder rock climbing, or super technical, say crevassed glacier travel that you need a rope. And that's one of the things they mentioned. If you're going to have to rope up, it can't be more than 10% of the total moving time. So they kind of set some limits so that people, aren't out there doing things like, the speed record on the nose as an FKT, because they want, even though that's iconic, that's kind of its own separate thing. And that record is kept in the rock climbing world, and they kind of want fastest known time to be a little bit more in the running world. Although I do think an evolution is going to happen here soon, where it's going to grow enough and the contributions from enough communities are going to become a part of it, that we're going to see more, say, mountain biking records hosted under that name of fastest known times, and rock climbing records under that name of fastest known time. Because it's just such a good name to like host a variety of things, instead of, we only do running focused efforts.
Do those other disciplines have somewhere where that's recorded, like the fastest known times?
I haven't done deep research into places that host various records. But I know there's like a few splintered places that keep track of some multi-sport outdoor records. There's places that keep track of some splintered places that keep track of like skiing records. And then obviously there's some places you can find like rock climbing records for iconic places such as the Yosemite Valley and things like that. But it actually would, to me, in my opinion, it would be cool to see that all sort of unified, any outdoor sport record sort of unified under one roof of fastest known time. I think that would be a pretty sweet thing.
And how many fastest known times do you hold?
I currently, well, I should say historically, I have held 94 different records. Out of those 94, I'm pretty certain I still currently have the fastest known time for about 54 or 55 of them. So over half of the records I've ever set, I still hold, which I think is pretty decent considering I've been going at these things like every weekend or every other weekend. Yeah. And
you're shooting for 100, right? That's the goal.
The goal. Yeah. I've been referring to it as my journey to 100. I'm shooting for 100 different fastest known times.
And you have a kind of a blog, right? That kind of talks about these adventures.
I have a blog, and actually, now would be a good time to jump on because I'm starting to get more. It's like the blog is kind of new. I've kept track of stuff on just social media, my Facebook and my Instagram, and now I'm starting to convert more of those stories into the longer form blog posts. And I'm adding those to my website, which is just jasonhardrath.com. So those will start to come out. You'll be able to read some of my thoughts and experiences as I've done these rock climbing and canyon routes and mountain routes. Definitely excited to kind of tell some of the story and try to take people through what it's like to make those decisions and be out there facing all the stuff we're used to when running, fatigue and muscle cramps. And, for those of us that do ultras, sleep deprivation and like facing all that while, doing your orienteering and making decisions on snow conditions and ice conditions and, employing, self-arrest techniques or steep snow climbing techniques or rock climbing techniques, rappelling techniques while you're experiencing, what's it like to get a massive quad cramp while, chimney climbing down a, chimney with another 80 feet of down climbing below you. So yeah, I think I've got some pretty interesting stories to tell, and I'm hoping to get more of those out going forward over the coming months.
That's awesome. And so you've been extremely busy going after all of these FKTs and adventure runs. But in a typical year, well, non-corona, you still race as well. Do you get to go out and do?
Yeah. So racing, I mean, you can see the video behind me of the bib numbers I have hanging on my wall here in my school office to provoke conversations with students. I forget, I have some 140 bibs hanging up behind me, I think. But in 2019, I actually sort of made the decision to try to have it be the first year I didn't pay for a race since 2002. And then I did that, and then 2020 happened and races disappeared. So it's like, well, guess I'm going to go another year without paying for a race. But yes, normally racing is something I do quite a lot of. In fact, I probably raced too much back when I used to race because I'm a person, I like the experience. Like I just want to be out there doing it and, testing myself. And I'm not so great at being like, oh, I'm just going to train and follow a training cycle, and then I'll do the one perfect cool thing this year. I'm like, no, let's do 100 cool things this year. So yeah.
I think a lot of people get caught up in that as well. So you're not alone. And so you've done ultras, obviously. What's the longest you've done Ironmans, but what's the longest running race you've done?
I've gone through the 100-mile mark in a 24-hour run. Okay. And I've done a 100-miler. So I've done both of those. And then other than that, some 100Ks, 50Ks, and 50-milers.
Which 100 did you do?
I did the Old Cascadia 100-miler here in Oregon, and it was an absolutely brutal year. Out of 70 competitors, I think only 10 or 11 finished.
Oh my goodness. Due to what was that?
So there were various hornets' nests along the course. So you were getting stung by bees on portions of the course, and then in the night it started sleeting and hailing.
Oh my gosh!
So it was an absolutely heinous, brutal first 100-mile race, and I'm really happy to have been, one of the top 10 to make it to the finish line.
Yeah,
one of the only 10.
Yeah, that's, oh my gosh, the attrition rate. That's wow. So let's talk a little bit more about the adventure running side of this. It doesn't necessarily obviously have to be an FKT. So let's talk route. Let's talk about the routes that you can come up with. Obviously, there's, like we talked about, there's ones that are already established, which you've mentioned a few resources that you can go find them on, such as the FKT website, AllTrails, Trail Run Project. What's some other ones that you can think of that might have some already established routes?
So let's see, already established routes other than the ones you've named. I would say like go-tos would be AllTrails, Summit Post. You can even just use the Strava segment explore function and look for like segments that are going up to interesting high points, because oftentimes people will make segments for their local, peaks. And then what you can do to turn that into an adventure run is it's like, okay, here's 2 peaks that people clearly like running up, or 3 peaks or 4 peaks. What is an interesting way I can connect them? And so there you have your premise for your adventure, right? To me, it's always you're answering a question. Like for me, I look at like a ridge line and I go do research. Like, has anybody traversed this ridge line? Has anybody done it fast? Can I find any records of it in, Mountain Project or Summit Post or, Northwest Hikers or whatever the host may be. Peakbaggers.com is another great one if you're going after peaks. And go read those reports and go, okay, so I'm going to try to use these different people's beta or come up with my own. And that's something unique from the rock climbing culture that I think adventure running and FKTs brings across to the running culture that's normally not a part of our culture. And that is this culture of projecting. Like, I'm going to take multiple weekends, in rock climbing, rock climbers will go revisit the same route potentially hundreds of times over the course of years to finally climb the entire route from bottom to top without falling. And that's just normal behavior. Like, oh yeah, I'm still working on that 512, whatever route climb in Smith Rock. I've been going back there 3 times a year for the last 6 years. That's normal. Like, you'll hear people talk like that all the time, but we as runners don't often go, oh yeah, I'm going to go memorize every step of a running race I'm going to do, unless it's like a really big race. If you're going to go race UTMB, you might go, pre-run a few of the climbs to know what you were going to face, but it's not normal habit, right? So I think in adventure running, you kind of take this mentality like, okay, I'll go out there and do some of my own research. Like, I'll try to climb, this mountain peak from this side, or I'll go check if the roads that connect, these forest roads are still, runnable. So you kind of go out there and you like do different pieces of the bigger project. And it serves as a great reason to get out and get on your training run for a series of weekends leading up to when you're going to actually do the big connection. So kind of taking that projecting mindset where you might answer some of your own questions that you can't find answers to on one of these resources that we've named, whether it's the fastest known time website, AllTrails, Peakbagger, Northwest Hiker, or if you find other more local resources or Strava. Talking to some of the local running groups or hiking groups can be great resources. Mountaineering groups in your area. Oftentimes you'll find some crazy person who's a part of one of those communities that's done some of the things you want to do in maybe a slightly different style. So those are all great ways to learn more. And then I think there's not much that can beat just getting out there and projecting on your own to develop your own map, which kind of brings me full circle to something that you're going to want to do, and that's using GPX files. Whether you can actually download GPX files that of other people's runs that you find on, say, Strava or other similar run hosting apps or websites. And basically what it does is it loads your the file of the route as sort of like a breadcrumb trail. We see it as the line we stare at when we look at someone's Strava that, sometimes people draw the funny shapes with on the streets. And you take that and you can load it to most, of the more modern running watches, or at the very least to your phone. You can load that GPX file. And you could load it into something like CalTopo, where you can then look at, elevation profiles in the maps, and, different like water source features in the maps. There's lots of different interesting stuff. I would definitely recommend learning how to use those apps while running in a safe space that you understand, a space where you already know how to orient yourself, and then use the map function to orient yourself if you're not experienced with that. I was just having a conversation with one of my coworkers. He went on a hike he'd been on before. That was just a short, like, local hike in a town just over the hills from us in Medford, up to what's called Table Rock. And he went up there, but it started snowing as he went up there, and he really didn't think anything of it. But by the time he got to the top and looked at the view and wandered around, his tracks had all been snowed over. And things look very different when conditions change, and it was foggy as well. Fog blew in. And so he found himself wandering around on the top of this sort of plateau, this Table Rock. It's like it sounds, it looks like a table in the sky. And he kept wandering around, cliffing out. He'd walk to an area where he thought the trail was, and it was a cliff. And he'd walk to another area, and he found after a while, it's like, I'm doing circles. And he'd never played around with using his phone or anything else to orient himself. And luckily, another person came up in the waning light of the day who was a runner and ran up and was like, oh, yeah, it's this way. And so he got back down. But he and I had a conversation. It's like, yeah, no, I mean, fiddle around with these apps and realize, like, when you're using a tracking app, oftentimes it will leave a breadcrumb trail, the line you can follow back down. But you want to know how to use that stuff ahead of time. You don't want to just get out there and start messing around on an adventure run and not have the skill set to get yourself back out. A lot of people recommend still carrying some kind of old school analog, magnetic compass, because if you know your area and you know your map and or you carry a paper map with you, you can at least orient yourself to go, okay, if I continue going this way, so you look, whether you're using the compass on your phone and you orient yourself and then look up and establish a landmark to move toward, or you use the magnetic compass, old school, and you go, okay, if I follow this heading toward, just to the left of a peak I see or a light I see on the horizon, or, remembering basic common sense, like the sun sets in the west, rises in the east, stuff that used to be so common to our ancestors that sadly nowadays, because of how much we live indoors and how many screens we have to stare at, we've started to forget culturally. You orient yourself, and then you're going to move toward a trail or toward your exit point, whatever you've established. And again, that's something you want to look at when you're looking at maps for adventure runs, is what forest roads exist or trails exist or water sources exist. And if something went wrong at this point, what would I be orienting toward? What peaks can I see on the map? What high points? So that way, when I'm out there, I both have sort of a visual representation of a map in my head, and I'm seeing what that map then looks like in the real terrain around me. So when I'm looking around in a 360-degree view, I can go, okay, there's a road below that peak to the east of it. So if something went wrong there, I could go to that road, and that road's going to be 15 miles out to get back to my car. So like knowing things like that saves your life in that situation, and knowing how to use your tools saves your life in that situation. And having a GPX file that you can load into these modern watches gives you a way to really efficiently. So if you're trying to move quickly, you can have your watch on the navigation screen, something I think a lot of runners use very little, and a lot of watches now have them. You can load a GPX file onto your watch, and then you can look down and see it. Am I on the track still, or am I off it? And I don't think that someone should go out and have that as their only form of navigation. Because for example, if someone loaded one of my GPX files, I literally will, run through crevassed terrain and, fifth class exposed rock climbing moves. And I don't think twice about it, because those are well within my skill set. But to a lot of people, that would be well outside of their skill set to be able to handle those types of situations. So you absolutely don't just want to be like, sweet, I've got a file, I'm good to go. Because the person before you might be a wild man.
That's true.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, I mean, just with basic map reading skills, a lot of outdoor shops, they will offer courses on how to use not only the paper and compass, but as well as use the apps that we're talking about. So it's great to be on the local outdoor shops newsletters and hear what course offerings they have, because you can pick up these little skills, and even some that you may need out there on the trail. Like you come to something that you're unfamiliar with. Let's just talk about that for a second. You come now, you're researching, and all of a sudden you're looking through this, and you're like, oh, this has some scrambling that I have to do, or this has some rappelling, or a water crossing, or something. Just a skill set they may not be as familiar with. How would you recommend they go about getting more comfortable with that?
Absolutely. I think about the way I go about my adventure running as this process of over preparation, not overtraining. So what I mean by that is any given skill set that I assess through this process we talked about of researching your route ahead of time, any skill set I need, I'm going to make sure I can more than perform the necessary requirements for it, whether that's an orienteering skill set, a glacier travel skill set, a rock climbing. So like if I know I'm going to be pulling 5-6 rock climbing moves, I'm going to be in the climbing gym and I'm going to be making moves that are 4 or 5 grades harder than the moves I'm going to face out there. So I know that any given move on the route, plus then I'll also, if it's got, exposed rock climbing, I'll go out and project the actual route too. So I'll have made every single move of that rock climbing route ahead of time. So it's like mapped and memorized in my mind. Right foot goes here, left hand goes to the side pull, step up. Like I'll have that memorized in my head. But also I'll be pulling harder moves for longer. I'll do longer sessions in the gym on harder routes than what I would be climbing outdoors, so that I can have this assurance in my mind that both my fitness and my skill set and my strength can all perform at that level for longer than necessary to complete that aspect of the route. Just like when we're preparing for an ultra race or a running race or a 5K even, we'll have done things in our training that sort of set our confidence to be like, okay, I know I can handle X, Y, and Z. I know that I can keep my nutrition straight for a 30-mile run, or I know I can I can handle sleep deprivation for people who run 100-milers or 100+ mile ultras. I know I can go without sleep up until 25 or 27 hours or whatever. So you do the same thing, but with the individual component skill sets within your experience. So, okay, I know I can perform rope skills in highly exposed terrain. So let's say your rappelling situation. Fear of heights is a real thing that we all experience. So, obviously in my own training, I've had to make sure in controlled and safe environments while moving slow and with a partner where I can methodically practice skills that over and over again, even in a state of high fear, I can focus in and perform all of the skills necessary to set up a rappel repetitively to go, do multiple rappels on much steeper and more difficult terrain than say what I'm going to face in a given adventure run. And that I can consistently do it 100 times out of 100, I can consistently do it. So that way, when I'm out there, I know that even if I'm, sleep deprived and I'm hungry because I messed up on my calorie intake, like I am going to not only know how to execute the skill and set it up in a way that I don't get myself injured or killed, but that I know how to double check myself that I've set it up correctly. And that's that constant process, not just doing the skill, but also knowing how to double check the skill before you rely on it with your life.
Did you get to watch the Ecco challenge on Amazon, the one they just released this past year with Coree Woltering was on there?
I think I've seen a trailer of it, but not the whole thing. I keep meaning to pull that up and watch it.
It was really fascinating because we know Coree as obviously as a runner, and he was on the KoopCast because Jason Koop was coaching him at the time, and Jason he's a great coach for triathletes, but this required so many new disciplines that Coree obviously did not have, rappelling being one of them. Boating, like just all of these things outside of his skill set. And, they talked about how Coree had to train on these different disciplines with, people that, did have the skill sets and learn from, friends and other coaches how to do these things. But, I think that's, it's often overlooked by people because they just feel that, like you said, they don't think about who did this before them and, what skill sets they have versus what skill sets the actual person doing it has. So I certainly appreciate we bringing that to the forefront and you expounding on that, because I want to make sure people understand they need to be putting safety at the forefront and making sure they have all the skill sets necessary to make sure that they get through this safely and uninjured.
Absolutely. On the higher budget side, let's say, you have an established career, so you're not worried about putting money into your hobbies, into your pastimes, into your passions, reaching out to local guiding companies, whether it's mountain guiding or rock guiding companies, great way to have them take you out. You can even ask for like a specialized, like, hey, these are the skill sets I want to learn. I don't even necessarily care where you take me out to do it. Just take me someplace cool. And this is what I want to walk away knowing, because I want to do a route that uses it. So you could even be that specific, or you could go for one of their general, either single day or multi-day courses. A lot of them do intro skills all the way up to high level skills. Now the lower budget way, if you don't necessarily have money to pay a guide, you could just plug in with local climbing or canyoneering communities on Instagram, Facebook, any other local channels that host groups. You can plug in, search through those social medias, search do a Google search for an area, and you can just plug in with these communities of people and find the people who have the voices that most genuinely seem to be wanting to help others and seem to be competent, that others in the group seem to, if you're new to the group, seem to hold in high regard when they have something to say. And, get out on, group experiences with the people who know what they're doing and learn from them. Go out and, invest time into it that way. If you don't have money to invest into it. So yeah, those would be ways to safely have someone who knows what they're doing, check your skills. Cause I think just watching a YouTube video, unless you are willing to go really slowly and stay in really safe spaces while you practice the skill sets over and over again, is, the person who watches a YouTube video and then goes and throws themselves. As a guide, I've had to face situations where people think they can watch a YouTube video and then go climb, Mount Shasta, which is a 14,000 foot peak with steep snow terrain. And they're holding their ice axe completely wrong, and they're scared out of their mind, and they don't know how to get down, and they didn't put their crampons on correctly because they watched the video all of one time. So it's like, there's a big difference between watching a skill and being able to perform a skill under pressure. There's a large gap there, and you need to make sure you've crossed that gap completely before you go out there, especially if you're going to go out there alone. And really going out there alone is something I disrecommend unless you're to the highly expert end of the spectrum. Way better to do this stuff with a partner. Plus, most of the time, it's more fun to share an adventure run with someone else, because then you walk away with this awesome shared story. Because something wild is bound to happen, even if it's not related to the preparation of your skills or the preparation of your route. Like wild things are going to happen while you're out there, and you're going to have stories that last a lifetime because of it.
Absolutely. And even on just, running routes, if people get out there and actually see the portions of the routes they're going to run, they can be more specific in their training and preparations for just a running route. I think sometimes we're like, wow, that run looks epic. And then we put ourselves out there and it's a little bit above our fitness levels. So I encourage people to understand what they're getting into. Like you talked about with topographic maps, like making sure that you understand what those little lines mean. And as they get, narrower and narrower, understand that you're getting steeper and steeper. And, you might be doing some scrambling yourself. So seeing it ahead of time, I agree. It's something I think would be the wise choice so that you train appropriately.
Yeah. And I mean, if your project is further away from you, maybe that involves looking at those topographical lines on your topographical map, and then looking at photos of a peak where you go, oh, that looks really steep, or that looks not so steep. And then you go look at the photo and you're like, oh, that's a cliff. Or, oh, yeah, no, that's runnable. Like I thought maybe that would be too steep, but it looks like, walkable or hikeable. And then that can be different for different places. Like some places, a certain, something that looks a certain steepness on the map might totally be climbable. And then you in a different part of the world, that same steepness is just, a series of cliffs stacked on top of one another. So you've got to know your area, whether that's looking at photos or walking out there and looking at the map and looking up at the peak above you and going, oh, that's what that looks like. And then you sort of build that understanding of how to read those maps more and more as you have more and more experiences of comparing the real world to what you see on the map.
And I mean, even races, when we read the descriptions, they say some rock scrambling may be required. If it says that in the notes, you may want to just kind of send an email to the RD and ask them just how much scrambling is involved and to what extent, because, on the East Coast here, I was doing a race up in New York and it said some rock climbing, may be involved, some scrambling. And, I just kind of was like, really? Like, and I mean, here I am on a rock face climbing up, and I had to take a break on a little ledge for a minute because I was like, oh my goodness, I totally didn't expect this to be the case here. But so yeah, if it's in the description, try to assess that a little bit better so that you don't get into a situation where you're above your pay grade.
Absolutely. And I mean, that is something that I can't emphasize enough. Exposure can change everything for a lot of people. I've spent so much time playing at exposure and practicing, and very intentionally practicing my skill set in a way where it's like, okay, if I can make these moves 1,000 times out of 1,000 on low terrain where I'm like 5 feet off the ground, then like mentally practicing, continuing to effectively make myself do them when I'm thousands of feet off the ground. But even still, my body, those instincts, those deep instincts that are inside all of us for self-preservation, like those things will scream inside your head, and it's really hard to focus. And it's really easy to lose your composure, even if it's not necessarily that difficult of terrain. But if you're way up off the deck and there's no trees, you're on, a rocky face, a slab, of rock, it's like suddenly you can't keep your head screwed on straight. And that is something you absolutely want to have had like safe, controlled experience with before you just go, oh yeah, like that looks great, I'll go try it. because the last thing you want is the person calling search and rescue because you're sitting on the ledge and you cannot get yourself out of panic mode. Right. Like you don't want to do that for yourself. You don't want to do that to search and rescue. It will feel really silly after the fact. Make sure you've prepared. Like, what does my mind do when I look around me and all I see are tiny trees thousands of feet below me?
Absolutely. Is anything else we should touch on that side before we move on to the devices that can keep us safe?
I think we covered that pretty well. Yeah, let's jump into some devices that make a difference out there.
Okay, great. So Jason was kind enough to kind of send me some things that we should touch on, and one of the first ones was dual lighting. What did you want to touch on there?
This has actually been a pretty recent game changer for me. I've been a weight weenie all through. I mean, like, as a triathlete, you're like finding any way. A buddy of mine and I discovered that we both biked fast enough that we could pull the bottle cages off of our bikes, and we would make it to the aid stations at just the right amount of time. That as long as, and both of us had kind of strong guts where we could just kind of chug 20 liter or 20 ounces, excuse me, of like Gatorade, and then just keep riding. So we're like, oh, sweet. Like we'll do this Ironman triathlon with no bottle cages on our bikes. 112 miles of biking, no bottle cages. So like, I came from this heritage of like weight weenie, find every way to optimize for weight and for efficiency. And so I used to go out on these adventure runs, and it's like, what's the lightest headlamp I can bring with me? Sure, I'm going to get a good amount of lumens, but I want, one single light, and I want it to be as light as possible. And recently, I started using a Kogala waist light, and absolute game changer. So you have this light coming from your waist that's a flood style light instead of a spot style light that most of our headlamps are. And it goes way brighter because you can also have a larger like battery pack system with it. Excuse me. And so you get this floodlight coming from waist level. So you get deeper shadows on all of the features of the terrain you're moving on. So with all the off-trail bushwhacking type stuff I do, that's a really big deal. That's like hundreds of fewer stumbling steps over the course of, say 20 miles of this type of terrain. Or even you think if you're on techie trails, 100 fewer stumbles, 100 fewer times where you lose pace and have to reaccelerate. Like, that's a big difference in efficiency and overall pace. And if you actually don't just stumble, you actually wipe out. Like, that's a difference in how happy you are for a number of miles too. Then the other crazy thing that's happened is I realized with that like bigger spectrum of light and a wider field of light, rather than just the narrow beam from the headlamp, I find personally, I don't get drowsy as early when pushing into overnight efforts. Sort of like staring at a TV screen when you should be going to bed, and you can kind of just keep not being tired until, exhaustion overtakes you when it's the wee hours of the morning. Kind of a similar thing where, normally you start to get a little bit drowsy after darkness sets in with just your headlamp. I find with the dual light system and that much light, like, it's kind of like looking at the TV and it's like, oh, I'm not really tired yet. Yep. Which huge difference in how much ground you're going to cover if you're feeling awake and you're able to see better. So like, more than makes up for the weight. Plus, oftentimes, if we're carrying these extra devices with us for an adventure run, you've got your cell phone, you've got, your watch. Maybe you're going to go ahead and need to recharge those things if it's a long enough run. The battery pack from the Kogala can be used to charge other devices too. It's just like any, battery pack, recharging pack you'd buy from the store. So you can use it to charge multiple things. And so it's not necessarily as much of a loss in weight either if you were already carrying a recharge pack for those other things, because now you've just consolidated that into my lighting system plus charging pack. So definitely a super useful tool if you're going to get out there in the backcountry. Plus, then if one of your lights fails, so you've got your headlamp, you've got your waist light. If one or the other fails, it's no big deal. And then obviously, if you have your phone with you, you've kind of got this bare minimum. I can at least walk slowly by the light of my cell phone to try to get out of here. That's horrible last resort, but if you've already got a duplicate in place, the likelihood that both lights would fail and then you'd be relying on the cell phone is super low.
I had a friend that we were in a race, and I came up on him, and he was using his watch, the Indiglow on his watch.
Oh my goodness!
That's. I was like, "Here's my extra headlamp right here. Take it." And he's like, "No, I'm good." I'm like, "Oh my god." I was like,
"No,
okay,
you're
man.
not good. Take it." Yeah.
I'm trying to shove it in his pack. He wouldn't take it, but anyhow, I agree. Yes, having the waist light is a game changer. And the Kogalla system is great. I'm actually an affiliate for Kogalla, so in the show notes there's a link there if anybody wants to look into it. I think they get 15% off if they use the link. But yes, Kogalla is a great product.
Great product, great team. I'm on their team now. After they found out I was using it for these adventure runs, they're like, "That's kind of a no-brainer." So yeah, super cool product.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Your next bullet point was double navigation.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, in a way, this is tripled navigation because we already talked about mentally knowing your route well enough that even if all systems failed, you could go, okay, that is east, that is such and such peak, and that is such and such peak, and if I go between them, there is a road that leads me out to safety. So you already have that mental map, right? If you're truly preparing for these things properly, you've got a mental map already stored away. Yep. But on top of that, if you're moving for efficiency, which if you're an adventure runner, you probably are. And if you're chasing an FKT, you absolutely are. Then I would say having a watch that does a loaded GPX track or even has a simulated map function in it. Absolutely. If you want to be maximally efficient, it allows you to reference whether you're staying on track and staying on bearing instantaneously. At any moment, you can check that you're still moving the right way and double check that up against the landmarks around you. And in some routes, if you're doing rim to rim to rim alt in the Grand Canyon, there are so many places where it looks like you should keep going one way, but actually you're breaking up the hillside because the trail is up above you. And it's really easy to get sucked down the wrong part of the canyon and end up having to backtrack because you cliff out. So having your map in watch form where you can be referencing it at any given second to double check yourself can save you a lot of steps, distance, and time. But then also having that on a phone or other GPS device, whether that's tied in with your emergency tracker, which you can get things that are both navigation GPSs and GPS communicators, or just tied in with your phone, where you have it loaded on CalTopo or Gaia GPS or AllTrails or some other app like that allows you to load in a route ahead of time. Always having those duplicates. And then obviously we mentioned, if you don't have that mental map memorized of the terrain around you, having a paper map and a compass could be a way to further, have triplicate of being able to get yourself out of there. And I think if you're going to go deep backcountry with a route where there's not many efficient and effective bailouts, then that's something you want to consider having, unless you've just memorized the area. But yeah, at least doubled navigation where it's oops, I fell and smashed my watch against a rock. I've got it on my phone. Yeah. Or, oh, my phone died. Well, I've got it on my watch. So definitely at least having doubled for most routes is definitely and that's saved me a few times, having two forms of navigation. And I've also been saved by just knowing my terrain really, really well. I had a situation where my watch went to a blue triangle of death where it wouldn't do anything except show the blue triangle, and my phone was borderline dead, so I had to keep powering it down and powering it up. And luckily, I knew the area, and I knew the route well enough and the landmarks well enough that I could just kind of go, okay, look at my phone for a few seconds. This is where I am. That means I'm going to, go to that point. I'm going to, bear to the right. And then if I continue straight down that gully, I'll meet up with a trail and I'll have my way out. Like, that's saved me before in some pretty deep backcountry terrain, pretty rough terrain. Just being able to have that confidence to know I just need to keep moving efficiently and I'll get out of here. So yeah, definitely at least double up on your navigation sources.
You had already started to mention the satellite devices that can be used not only for mapping, but can also be used for SOS or communication. Why don't we touch on those next?
Absolutely. I mean, as a running community and like a light and fast mountaineering community, we obviously have kind of been obsessing over the small, lightweight stuff like the Garmin Mini and the spot trackers, and now there's Zoleo, and I think it's SomeWear is another one. And some of these like pair up with your phone, so you could like text over satellite through the device to communicate back and forth. And then also, if your phone dies, they still can send out like an SOS beacon to search and rescue, or a check-in directly just to your family and friends that you've pre-programmed into their website interface. That's the other big thing, is whether you're using the Garmin Mini or any of the Spot products or Zoleo or SomeWear, you have to preset it up. You have to have a plan for it, a paid plan. Usually they're monthly or yearly memberships. And then you have to go in and preset, like, all right, these are the automatic messages I want sent if I push the button number 1 for a check-in, or button number 2 for something's wrong. And then obviously button number 3, you're going to set it up. It's going to automatically connect you. If you push the SOS button, it's automatically going to be going out to search and rescue and emergency services. But also you can program that button, like also send an email to this person or a text message to this person where they know something has gone seriously wrong. And they know they're going to need to find out like what hospital I'm in or where I'm being delivered by search and rescue. But that all needs to be pre-set up before you ever go out the first time. And I often like to test, not the SOS function, never want to test that one. And I think actually some of them do have a way you can, like, while you're on the website, go in and like do a test of the button by it, like will temporarily power down it actually going to search and rescue, and you can make sure the button actually works. But other than that, you don't want to test the button because you're actually going to cost yourself some money by, triggering, search and rescue. And they have insurance you can pay for through them as well to cover the costs if you ever have to be rescued. So, and sometimes there's volunteer search and rescue in areas. So like, don't not push the button if you're worried about like money. Like if you need to be saved, you need to be saved. But yeah, there's a variety of them. All of them need pre-set up in some way. You want to make sure that you've set it up correctly where, test it out with your friends. Like, okay, these are the three friends who know I'm going out on adventure. Also, by the way, still send your friends like, this is my timeline. I should be on this peak roughly between these hours, and this peak roughly between these hours, and this peak roughly between these hours. And if you don't hear from me by, and give yourself a cushion, because you're not necessarily going to give up on your adventure if you're 15 minutes off pace. Give yourself a cushion, but like if you don't hear from me by this time, you activate search, because there's always the possibility you get knocked unconscious, right? And then if your friends can activate search and rescue, they can still use your tracking device to find where you are and come out and find you, even if you're still incapacitated, and potentially be saved that way. But yeah, you always want to have like a backup, because there's always the possibility you lose consciousness for one reason or another. So just having an SOS device and being out there by yourself and no one knows where you are is still a really bad situation. Don't recreate the 127 hours story. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's the guy that got the boulder that pinned his arm in a slot canyon, and he hadn't told any of his friends where he was and had no cell reception or tracker device. Interesting movie to watch. It gets gory though, so trigger warning. So yeah, you definitely want to have, if you're going to do deep backcountry, especially, having a satellite-based communication is absolutely huge. The first place this started to become super important was when my girlfriend and I started to do some efforts in Death Valley, and there's almost no cell reception in a lot of Death Valley. And so that was one of the first places where we not only wanted one-way communication that a lot of devices offer, but two-way communication so that you could communicate back and forth to check in and assess progress in that way. So yeah, that's another question you can sort of assess for yourself. Do I just need a one-way tracker where I can hit a button and it communicates out to people? Or do I want to also be able to receive communications from family or friends while I'm out of cell reception? And that's totally dependent on what you think your needs are and the situation you're going to be in. A lot of times the answer is no, you don't really need that. You just need a check-in button and a SOS button.
And how about on the front of cellular triangulation? I've heard mixed reviews on how effective that can be. Have you heard anything on that's efficacy?
I mean, to this day, the general consensus, what you hear people saying is like, don't just rely on cell phone. I mean, is it going to help search and rescue? Like, not have to search like as large of a swath of land? Yeah, I mean, it's going to narrow it down significantly, but it's nowhere near as accurate of a point as the satellite tracking will be. I mean, oftentimes those things, just like our watches will, when we're tracking a run, will be accurate within, a few feet, oftentimes, sometimes even within a foot of where we actually were. I mean, that's if you're out there and your leg is broken or you're, in a bad way, that's the level of accuracy you want. Not, well, we've got it pinned down to somewhere within this 12-mile circle.
Right.
You don't want search and rescue combing a 12-mile space if your leg is broken.
Sure. Right.
So yeah, probably worth it if you're going to be deep backcountry and
Sure.
in places and on terrain where you could get hurt.
Yep. Awesome. Anything else we should touch on there for the satellite devices?
I mean, I kind of mentioned the infatuation with the smaller, lighter devices, but also a lot of the bigger devices that do full on, like you can load every bell and whistle of a map into them and it displays a color display. It's full size resolution. A lot of those GPSs also now are communicators, whether they do one-way or two-way communication and SOS function. So if you're not as much of a weight weenie, that can be an amazing tool to solve all of those problems for navigation and for communication in deep backcountry situations. So that's worth mentioning. Like maybe get out of, you're like, oh, I have to shave every ounce kind of mindset and go, maybe it's okay. Like, cause I like to do hiking too, instead of just running. Maybe it's worth it to go with one of those devices. And sometimes they're even similarly like priced, even though they have way more functionality, just because, weight and size adds cost to, it increases the expense of a product to try to fit power into a smaller size. So sometimes you can get way more performance for a similar price if you're just willing to go a little bigger and heavier.
Cool. All right. And our our last bullet point, unless you can think of something else, would be the water filtration systems.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious thing, and if you've spent any time running around in the backcountry, you have at least one friend who talks about how awesome the Katadyn Befree flasks are. They're super efficient. You just open it up, dip it in the stream or creek or pond or whatever, and close it up. And then as you squeeze it, it feeds it through the filter. So oftentimes with normal pumping systems that say backpackers use, you're going to stop for a few minutes to refill your bottles, and whether you're doing a bladder or flasks or bottles, and you're going to like pump and fill each of them and then put the system away and put the bottles or the bladder away. With the Befree flask, it's like you're going to stop for 10 seconds. So if you're trying to move super efficiently, and there's going to be like multiple water stops, creek crossings, lake crossings, like that can be a great way to go to be super efficient out there. But then a lot of this, looking into the backpacking world, is a great place to find a lot of really good filtering products. And there's always the option of iodine tabs as well. Though you have to remember that oftentimes those recommend at least 30 minutes of sitting in the water before you drink it. So if you don't want to set yourself up to like have gone 2 hours, 3 hours in warm weather without water, and then it's like, okay, now I'm going to put an iodine tab in this water, and like, all right, just going to go without water another 30 minutes. I have self-restraint. Yeah, definitely want to think that through if you're going to rely on the iodine tabs. But I definitely recommend the Befree flask for getting out there if you're going to be running between fairly frequent water stops. And you can also use it for longer carries. Carry as in you're going to have to carry more water for a longer distance. If you just you scoop it with the flask and then you squeeze it, it's a pretty efficient flow rate. So you could squeeze and fill a 2-liter bladder, and then dip it in again and have it full. And I think they come in both a 600 milliliter and a 1 liter size. So it's a pretty efficient way. I've used them for a lot of big routes with long carries between water, and it's still an efficient system. And you can just have it there in the front of your pack. Yep.
And I think Solomon now has their own as well. They have the nozzle you can screw onto the like the Hydro Flask bottles and stuff. So Solomon's come out with their own version of it. I think the only thing we also should say is that if you have electrolytes or something, you need to have your separate nozzle on that bottle. So you can pour it into a bottle that has electrolytes in it, but put your regular nozzle on that. It won't work with the filtration system.
Don't run your sports nutrition through the filter. Not going to work.
Yeah, that's the message I was trying to convey. Thank you. That's putting it succinctly. Awesome. Anything else you got for us, Jason? Any last words of wisdom, imparting knowledge you want to give to us?
Yeah, I mean, I guess remember to have fun with this whole process. Like it's all play. You're experimenting. Like I said, have sort of set that big question out in front of you with what your adventure is and what you're trying to answer for yourself. And remember to be playful with it. You're a kid on a playground. I have the privilege of getting to teach little kids that constantly remind me how to be in that mindset of like, I'm just here to goof off and play and have fun. And yeah, I'm doing it in very serious, very big, very high consequence situations and terrain. But the motivation is still the same. Like, I want to go out and play, and I'm curious, and I want to discover and explore. And so, like, throughout the process, remember it's something you want to do and something you're playing with. And if something stops being fun, it's okay to change directions and do something else. Like, don't force yourself into a box that like, I have to finish this because I started it. Because that's not the point of an adventure run. That's not the point of an adventure. Like, you're out there to play, to explore, and to be curious.
Perfect. That's beautiful. That's, the message that I try to convey all the time to my runners. So I appreciate you reinforcing that. Jason, if people have questions or want to reach out to you or follow you, what's the best way they can do so?
We mentioned the website that I'm going to be putting longer form blogs on, jasonhardrath.com. I'm Jason Hardrath on Instagram and on Facebook as well. I usually am pretty easy to find on both of those platforms. If you reach out through the messages on either of those, I tend to get back pretty quickly within a day. And yeah, willing to answer any of the questions about the 94 FKT adventures I've been on, or any other curiosities you have about products I use or things that are more efficient in different types of terrain. I genuinely love this stuff. I love playing at it, so I love having conversations about it too.
Obviously. Thank you so much, Jason, for your time and for sharing all that with us.
This has been awesome. It's been a lot of fun to talk this stuff through. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you once again, Jason, for coming on the podcast. That was really a wealth of knowledge that we crammed into the episode there. So I certainly appreciate that, and I wish you well on your future endeavors. Jason and I had a conversation after we recorded that episode, and he talks about what he is planning to do for his 100th, and man, it is something I don't want to announce it, without him going public with it. I'm sure since we talked about it, it's okay, but even so, I'll leave that for him to do. But needless to say, his 100th attempt at an FKT is on the scale of amazing. It's a whopper, so really cool, and I wish him the best in it. So thank you again, sir. Things around here are moving along. This weekend, I am doing a 50 miler, just one that I am created to simulate the Umstead 100 course. Umstead 100 is a 12.5 mile, pretty much like a lollipop loop. But I did an out and back course here in Western North Carolina that would simulate the surface and elevation gain that I would see on a loop out at Umstead. So I am doing 4 loops of 12.5 miles this weekend. And I'm trying to sustain my 100-mile pace just to see how it goes, practice with my gear, nutrition, all of that stuff, kind of like a dry run, if you will, for Umstead 100, which is coming up the end of March. So I've got some friends that are coming out to run with me and stuff. Should be pretty fun. Looking forward to the challenge. The daddy-daughter dance that I was supposed to do with my daughter got postponed, so I'm trying to get it done early and then go do the daddy-daughter dash with my daughter. So wish me luck on that. We'll see how that goes. But it should be fun, no matter what. So yep, that's what's going on here. Training's going well. Really excited to go back to Umstead, as I kind of talked about in the last episode. In the closing comments, about what Umstead means to me, and how it's was kind of my introduction to ultramarathoning. So kind of coming full circle with it. So I'm excited for that opportunity. Other than that, just busy. Coaching has really exploded. As I keep saying, it's great. I certainly appreciate the everybody coming to me. I want to say thank you to everybody that voted for me in the Blue Ridge Outdoor competition for best of 2020. I placed 3rd in the coaching category, and that was all coaches. So, cycling, triathlete, running, any type of coach, they're all in there. So to place 3rd place, I was really, really pleased and grateful. It's an honor. So thank you all for that vote. If you voted, and I really, can't thank you guys enough for that. That was pretty cool. I've been working on another certification as well for coaching. Actually, I've been working on 2. As I probably mentioned in the past, I'm working on a ultra running certification. Jason Koop came up with a certification with the folks at UESCA. So I've been working through that. I am over halfway, almost 3/4 of the way through it, and then I have to take my test. And I am also working on a level 3 certification for the Arthur Lydiard Foundation, which I really enjoy and have absorbed a lot of their training methodologies and actually applied them to myself. If you're following me on Strava, I've really been working on trying to keep my easy runs super easy and building that like huge aerobic base, which Arthur Lydiard was such a promoter of. And so, I can say I was on the treadmill this morning, just doing a recovery run. I did just under 20 miles for my long run yesterday, but I was just on the treadmill and running, and I was doing about 8:27 pace, and I was just over 100 beats per minute. I think my average was 101, which is zone 1 for me. So running 8:27 in zone 1. It's pointing to, things are coming around really well. My aerobic base is really strong. So I'm hoping that, really supports me in this 100-miler coming up. If you have questions, about coaching, about running, don't hesitate to ask. Jump on Strava, follow me, ask questions. If you see things, like how did I go about doing all this? It really, it really came from this Arthur Lydiard training that I've gone through. I did levels 1 and 2. And now I'm working on 3, which goes like really deep dive into everything that's going on when you're in, the aerobic based training, when you're in the hill training phase, which, again, I did, if you remember seeing in Strava, if you follow me again, I was doing a lot of plyometric drills and such like that to build up my musculoskeletal system after I got through my base period. Just super cool stuff. A lot of people use his principles this day and age. He's kind of one of those coaches that everybody kind of looked up to and uses his methodologies, not to the full extent, but, he definitely made a dent in coaching. So I'm really enjoying learning more and getting a deeper dive into, this certification in coaching. So staying busy, obviously, with all that, recording the podcast here. I do owe a few YouTube videos, which, I will certainly get out. I keep saying that, but, it's definitely my intention to get those done. Came up with a few new, hip and leg strengthening routines and core routines. So I'm going to try to post those. I've had some questions about like uphill running, downhill running, pole usage. So those are going to take me a little bit more time. I just don't want to slap something together. I really want to feel comfortable with putting out something that, is useful, obviously. It's going to take me a while longer to generate the content for those things. I certainly do appreciate the recommendations, for videos, for podcast episodes. So if you do have something that you would like to hear about or see, that I can create content for, by all means, send me a note. My email is runningpains@gmail.com. And, I'm always up for that conversation. I'm here to help. That's, what the podcast is about, is just kind of giving some useful content that people can learn from and hopefully take things away from. So same with the YouTube channel. And other avenues, you can reach out through Facebook. I have the MR Runningpains Coaching Facebook page, MR Runningpains on Instagram. And I'm actually Aaron Saft. I need to kind of create a little bit more consistency through my channels, but I'm Aaron Saft on YouTube. And I'm also Aaron Saft or MR Runningpains on Strava. But thank you guys. Thank you for everything. Thank you for listening. As everybody says on a podcast, if you share these episodes, like and subscribe, leave a review, that's very super helpful for other people to find it, and kind of spread the content. And it's been a great joy growing with this, and I sincerely appreciate those that have come on to to Patreon, Nate Heaslip. I don't think I mentioned Nate yet, but I thank you, Nate, for coming on. Nate's been a long time listener and very supportive. He and his wife were both on the show. They talked about Jen's running and how they do it as a couple, because Nate is an endurance athlete as well. So thank you guys for that support. It's great that I can do this and not have to lose money in the process. So thank you guys for that support. It really does make me be able to do this. So not that anybody has to jump on, but if you can, even $1 a month, it's super helpful. I had a comment that I feel bad that I can only do $1 a month. That's definitely goes into helping this sustain itself. So sincerely appreciate that, and I can't wait till next time, episode 54. We'll be back in your ears next week. So thank you again, guys. I can't thank you enough, and we'll talk to you next time.